Well, welcome in today's webinar. We are very glad to see all of you here gathered today. We thought it was appropriate to have this discussion, obviously in the context of what's been going on in the business in the last years, in terms of the subscription economy. Becoming stronger and stronger. Everybody knows the examples of in the software industry where one used to buy a CD to install Office on their computer, which has now, of course, been replaced by a cloud license in the form of a 365 subscription. We saw the same thing happening in the media with companies popping up like Spotify or Netflix. But today we also want to today we want to study those models, and we believe that in many companies, many industries in the next few years, subscription-based business will become more and more important. We see in the automotive industry, we see ideas and companies popping up like Cambio, where you actually share a car instead of owning it. And there's a famous example where every DIYer in the country buys a drill, and then it turns out that every drill is only used for 10 minutes in the whole lifespan of that drill. So it makes much more sense to actually hire it based on a subscription maybe than to actually own stuff. So again, thank you very much for joining this webinar today. I'm very glad to be together here with two experts in the subscription economy. I will be joined by Dominic Reid, who's a global partner manager for Zone & Co, and has extensive experience in the software business, in the fintech world, etc. We also have today James Hewitt with us, who's had various roles, especially in terms of CFO roles, finance roles, has actually been setting up subscription automation platforms at some of those companies where he was active. So James will be able to tell us straight from his experience a lot about the topic of today. And myself, I'm director at sales and marketing at Novutech. We focus on NetSuite business, obviously, as a NetSuite solution provider in Western Europe, and mainly focusing on the software industry and professional services, where subscription is already a common topic, but also on the commerce industry, WD, retail, where also we believe subscription will become more and more important in the next years. So today we'll be looking at some of those details, some of the characteristics and the evolutions in the subscription economy. We'll have a discussion between ourselves and hopefully with a lot of interaction from the audience on how you could actually set up the right set of tools, the right tech stack to manage your subscription business within your own company. We'll be looking at how that plays together with the backbone of most companies, which is your ERP system, and how that billing, that automated billing then flows into your GL of your company. And then we'll also take a closer look at a great solution built within NetSuite called Zone Billing. So I'm happy to give the floor now to Dominic to start to lead us through the subscription world.
Thank you. Thanks, Jan. Good introduction, and thanks for everybody for joining today. I'm excited to have this session with you. I'm presuming you can all hear me because I've not had any messages saying that you can't, so that's good, and that you can see my screen. So as Jan said, I'm going to talk a little bit, just some high-level observations that we're seeing in the subscription economy. And then I will dive a bit deeper into some of what sits behind those trends and what we see, you know, not only the industry, but what we see as a business, you know, working with companies that are looking to go to that subscription model for their go-to market. So I will just move on here. So first thing is, you know, the main one is like the subscription economy is growing, right? You know, I think it's been growing for quite a while, and it's been mainly in that kind of the space of the SaaS companies, the software companies, maybe some of the services companies as well that are driving that. But I think down to sort of customer sort of need and customer expectation, you know, this has driven this subscription into more of a usage-based model, which I'll come to in a minute. But as you can see, the size of the subscription economy is going to be some 1.5 trillion by 2025. So I think now is a good time to be thinking about it. If you're running a business and you're considering, you know, should I move to a subscription model? You know, now is probably the time to start looking at that. And I kind of touched on the fact that, you know, other industries are looking at this. And if we sort of split this down a little bit into the European view, the previous slide was more of a global view. The European view, you know, when you look at this, and this is very much in line with what we see as a business, and where a lot of our business sits is in that software and services area. So you can see some 240 billion is in subscription revenue has come from that services area, which includes software. Then you're seeing, you know, some other sort of industries coming into, or services coming into that. So information goods, you know, so data goods and things like that, consumable goods. So like everyday things that people are using, is coming into that market a little bit more. So it's definitely growing, and it's definitely expanding. And I think the reason that, you know, we're seeing this sort of economic trend of, you know, the subscription economy growing is because you are getting these other industries coming into the subscription economy and starting to use these kind of services. And if I just touch on who are these people and what do we see? Okay, so I'm not going to go into each one and every one of these, but just to start here, you know, a lot of the industry sectors that are making the move, you know, SaaS and cloud tech, that's kind of already there, right? That's been happening for many years. You know, Zoning Co have been around for 10 years doing this, working in this industry, and that has been the sort of core of our business. But then you're seeing things like e-commerce. So e-commerce companies where they're trying to entice their customers to come and spend a bit more with them. So they're asking them to subscribe to their loyalty program or whatever, which is then giving them ability to save on what they're buying. And then if you move across into like the internet of things, for example, so devices, so a manufacturing company selling a device that they want to sell the device, okay, so they sell the device in the first place, but then they also want to be able to charge for usage of that device, okay? And that in itself, you could class that as subscription, but you could also class that as just complex billing, right? So there's that as well. So a good example would be there's a company called Track Unit in the Nordics where they have a device they put on a vehicle and they charge for that. So things like that are what we're seeing. Entertainment, like everybody on this call, I'm sure, has some kind of streaming application. Okay, so a Netflix, a Spotify, whatever. That's been there for a little while as well. Then if you think about the fitness and well-being sector, you know, you've got standard gym membership. That's been around for years, right? That's a given. But then some of the things like virtual care, so online things where they subscribe and they get more advice about their health and well-being, those kind of things is where they can be there as well. And then managed services. So if you think about managed services for your IT department, for example, a way of, you know, instead of paying, you know, an amount every month, you know, sort of a way of expanding that. And then automotive is another one where you could say, well, people have been leasing their cars for years, but I think Jan even mentioned it in his introduction. What we're talking about here is vehicle as a service, right? So I think a few of these, I know, for example, Jaguar have their priority program here in the UK, and they essentially, you get everything. You get the car, you get the service plan, you get the tires, all wrapped into one. And actually, you know, that's changing things a lot. So see, these are just some observations we see. And if I just move across a bit and just go back to the usage-based billing area, because this is something we see a lot on. So as I said, software companies have been around for a while, and we've been servicing those software companies with our solution. But what we're seeing now, it's less of a monthly subscription, you know, for a service that you're providing. This is a lot more complex. Okay, as soon as you get into usage-based billing, you've got to consider things like, well, how are you charging for your usage? It could be bucket pricing, you know, it could be one solution with different variations, and dependent on the variation will dictate the price. Could be volume-based pricing, you know, these kind of things. You know, that's just one example, and that's like the first thing people think about. That's the next thing they go to. It could be time of usage pricing. So, and what I mean by that is, if you look at the right hand of your screen on the ad hoc based pricing, we see that in the utilities arena quite a lot, in the renewables energy sector, where you want to charge for the time the energy was used, right, or the season it was used. And then you have things like prepaid credits, where you get the customer to commit to X amount per month, and then everything they go over that bucket, say, they get charged an overage. And then you have these sort of minimum commitments as well, where they pay an amount, and that's the commitment they get, but they're still being charged on usage. So this usage area is huge. It causes a lot of complex billing requirements. So it's not all you know, pure play subscription. It is complex billing, okay, but there's likely to be a subscription in there as well, and we see that across all kinds of sectors as well. And just to pick a few of the trends there, you know, so usage-based billing has been around for a while, but not that long, you know, only since 2018, and each year we've seen it grow, right? So as you can see, that the projection, it's going to grow by 61% in this year. But there's people obviously going that way, and there's people testing it and expecting to test it. And you can see, you know, some 21% in 2023 is the growth of people looking to test it. So I think, you know, you'll see it across consumer goods, but you also see it in that business market as well. And if we just summarize a little bit what we see, you know, whether you're a sort of a complete startup, you know, starting from the ground, you know, and being able to be born digital, or born global, sorry, is what I meant there. That is driven by data and our access to data. So we have a lot more access to data now, so it allows us to be able to be almost global straight away. But some of the challenges that come with that is you can grow rapidly, but you can't hire fast enough, okay? You can't get enough people in your business, so you're forced to do automation, okay? But also, if you're an established company and you have a legacy stack of technology, you're also, it's harder for you to go to market and compete with these brand new companies that are growing up at the moment. So there's a few things to consider there. But with that, I think let's bring James into the conversation really, and talk about, you know, what he sees and all the rest of it. So just sort of give us your thoughts, James, on why we're seeing this shift right now in this subscription economy.
Yeah, cheers, Dom, and hi everybody. Thank you also for joining. So I'm going to I'll put my finance hat on first of all. You know, it's a competitive market space out there in all industries at the moment, especially with the economic challenges, you know, especially the macro ones going on, and the challenge for investment and that competitive landscape is such that, you know, businesses are really striving to get that recurring revenue. That recurring revenue is going to drive the valuation. That's what's going to take businesses that we see, especially, you know, in what we see in the UK, you know, driving businesses from a single digit multiple to a double digit multiple, in terms of having that bigger mix of services that are confirmed, that you're signing people into 12 months to 36 months or however long it might be. And with that, of course, because you're demonstrating, or people are demonstrating, that you've got that longer term commitment, you've got that the revenue, most importantly, you've got the cash. As I don't know if we've got many accounts on the call, but you know, they're completely separate in in their importance, and having that regular cash income is critical. But what it then also does is allows diversification. So whether it's SaaS and then being able to have a core base of SaaS or fintech or subscription based to then launch into a new market or a new product, and keeping that diversification and spreading the risk across the portfolio of products and services is really key. So I mean, from a financial basis, and then from a usage basis, I think, you know, with the development of the technology, which we'll come on to in a little bit more detail shortly, and you gave some great examples there, Dom, of where people are using those different tools, you know, to charge people. But now there's the ability to actually think about what your cost base is. So an example would be, if one of those examples was information, you're selling information. So you might have an AWS database, which you're paying by unit, and you want to charge your customer by unit. And speaking to a lot of businesses and looking at what they come from their legacy, they just don't have that ability to drill into actually what's my profitability, because we're not charging, you know, our revenue isn't necessarily linked to any cost, and that causes that ambiguity in gross margin. So it's really difficult, or has been in the past historically, to pull that together, especially when you've got a CRM and the like, maybe acting slightly differently and doing pricing. So I think those combination of those things is really then driving the shift to it. And as I say, not least the fact that there's now the technology, and people are a lot more data driven. It is digital. People are really thinking about this as they start to develop their services. Yeah,
brilliant, thanks. And is there any, I know you've got some experience in this field yourself, in considering these kind of sort of things. So what learnings have you seen from deploying solutions to sort of to capitalize on the opportunity?
Well, again, going back to your prior slide, I mean, there's loads of complexity, and I see it from it's understanding your product. I think when anyone starts embarking on this, you know, really understanding the product, the services, and where it can fall down almost from the start really is not knowing that. So understanding, you know, does it fit subscription? How's it going to fit? Is it feasible to do usage? And then of course for what product? And, you know, weighing up these pros and you know, the opportunities, but then of course the challenge is the administration of it. So what I see quite commonly is where, and we say a lot in our industry, adopt early. It's difficult. We all know these things are pricey and whatever else, but adopt early with the right tools and the right advice and partners. Because what I see an awful lot of is this already evolved. You've got commercial teams going out and selling this and selling that, and they kind of move on this commercial journey, and then you end up with we'll talk about disparate systems shortly, but in an example, but it's even then disparate kind of commercial offerings and billing offerings and different terms and different products, and then that complexity then comes between just being able to invoice people, but then obviously of course the recognition on the revenue. So, you know, from my experience, you know, adopting early, getting the right advice early, and really structuring your products around that, in the view that it is then scalable and sustainable. But so it's understanding it from a billing perspective, but also then from a statutory perspective, you know, from a revenue. And for you, I will put my accountant hat on now. You know, you've got IFRS 15 and these, you know, the gaps of this world where, you know, they're a lot hotter on revenue. Every time you go into an audit, the first thing that they will look at, and the most important thing, will be revenue. I guarantee it. And now the challenge that companies face as well in this digital data-driven world is it used to be the top couple of firms in the world used to do this, but now it's going down to probably top 10, top 20. They take all your data, every single transaction from your system, and then they pump it into their analytics, you know. So it's got a real laser focus on. So it's that presents its own challenges, especially for those growing businesses that may not have been audited before and now are being audited, or been acquired by a group, or you're changing accounting standard, whatever it might be. So there's a raft of different challenges in there.
Yeah. So from what you're saying there, you're basically saying the commercial organization is going out and selling before the infrastructure has been built. And what you're saying is maybe build the infrastructure first before you consider taking it to market.
Well, yeah. So if I put my FD hat on, absolutely, that's the answer. But we all know, and lots of people on the call, I'm sure here, of we know that's the ideal, but we don't live in an ideal world. So you've got to get the revenue in, got to get that cash generation and the revenue, and then the cash generation in. So it's a balance. But then whatever stage of the journey, like I say, we adopt early, with the right advice and the right tools and the right process, you can combat those situations.
Okay, with that in mind, then, I mean, what would your main considerations be in using a tech stack to support subscription, and like what have you seen others doing in the industry?
So the first bit is to, before embarking on this, is really think about that preparation time, and I've touched on it already, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on understanding your products. Understanding, because if you go into any tech stack design or straight maybe into an implementation of any tool, if you don't understand your fundamental and what you need to get out of it from a services point of view and a product's point of view, it's going to be an uphill battle. So really starting at those basic levels to understand what you need out of the tech stack, and then thereafter, what we see, I've already mentioned the commercial offerings, and then it becoming quite disparate. Again, we'll come on to an example of that in a moment. Sure. So I do see a lot of different systems, different products. You might have acquisition based, so someone's got an M&A strategy. They may end up with this business on this tool, this business on this tool. Some of them, even within one business, they might do their invoicing through one tool, in one regard, and then through another. And then you've got a CRM chucked in there. Some will go through the CRM, some won't. So you end up with this spider web of that. So do see that quite a lot. But then also it's considering not only the services, but really thinking about that end to end, and thinking, okay, well, yes, this is what I'm selling, and we may have to speak to our commercial teams just to kind of bring it back in line. Right. But then also kind of what's the end to end? How? So yes, okay, this is our lead gen, this is our opportunity, this is our conversion. Then we go into an order, but then from a system point of view, how do we then track that all the way through to make sure that the system is then optimized through the raising of the order, the invoicing of it, the recognition of it, but then critically also the cash allocation of it. And when, especially if people are coming from smaller systems or accounting software, they're probably doing those as separately. Or plugging things in at different stages. So looking at it holistically is really, really key to ensuring that end to end comes together. And then, but then also the importance of data reporting, that falls down, getting that in the conversation nice and early, understanding what you want out of it. So I think there's, if we look at the traditional SaaS and fintech, but having that conversation nice and earlier about, okay, well, this is how I'm going to bill, this is the revenue, but actually, what are the key metrics of the business? What are the key KPIs? What does my ARR need to look like, our MRR, our CAC, our cost of acquiring the customer, and so on? Because while some of these you can pick up later on down the line, some of them you can't in the structure. So really that pre-work, and then so those are some of the some of the key things that I've seen across the implementations I've done, and my own experience. So, you know, we arguably weren't ready to go live with a billing tool, and you know, when it went sideways, that was in automotive subscription based. So, you know, thinking about those key elements, those key milestones to enable that continuity. Yeah, and then having a good partner to do it obviously is critical, but it doesn't have to be all in one. You can phase it in. I know Jan will come on to it a little bit later in terms of that approach. So I won't go too far into it. Those are some of the things I'm seeing.
Thanks, James. So what I'll do now is I'll talk a little bit about what we see. You know, often when organizations come to us, this is kind of the journey a lot of organizations have gone through, perhaps before they've got in touch with somebody like ourselves. So if you think about a tech business, it's always going to start with their engineering platform. Like, this is where they've built their solution, and where a lot of that, I mentioned usage data, but a lot of that information about how they want to sort of charge their customers comes from. And then they'll look at, okay, so I need a CRM and a CPQ, right? So a way to quote and things like that, and where to store the customer data. And then they, at this point, they say, hey, we've got all our customer data, we've got our platform. Now we need to think about how we can financially manage that. So they invest in an ERP. And then the next stage is often what happens is they'll invest in a third-party billing tool, which there's 10 a penny out there, right? You know, that you can pick from. And then this is all quite simple right now. You know, we've got the engineering platform where the usage data is, we've got the CRM, we've got the billing tool, and then we want to contract, invoice, and send for payment, which is fine. But then you got to think, how do I get my tax information in there? So then they have to start to think about, okay, what tax engine am I going to use so I can drive that information into my contract? And then you mentioned IFRS and things like that earlier, James, but, you know, revenue recognition. Okay, so we need to manage the revenue recognition, and that's often, most third-party billing tools don't have a revenue recognition solution built in there. So then they have to think, okay, get the RevRec tool in, and now you have to integrate into the ERP. So straight away, there's 3 points of integration here, okay, which is always, the more integration points you have, the bigger risk it's going to be. But also you've got duplicate journal entries as well to get that revenue recognition data into your ERP. And then send them for payment. You know, you're seeing a theme sort of here on this screen. You mentioned reporting earlier, James, there. So a lot of these solutions have a reporting tool of some sort, okay? But what you end up with is disparate reporting, okay? So reporting all across the business, but maybe not one unified reporting tool, which is probably what you'd be looking for. And one thing I forgot to mention, if you are working on a usage-based solution, then you're going to need to do some data mediation, right? So you've got the usage in one area, and then you need to charge the customer. And often it'll be the data, for example, is consumed in one way, but you're charging your customer another way. And that's where you're really going to have to, that could be Excel. You know, we see Excel a lot out there for doing things like this. So maybe, James, does this screen resonate with you and what you've seen? I think you talked about some of this already, but is this kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly that. So it's a good graphic to show what can evolve, and this is very similar to what I had, you know, because within here, you know, from a finance, maybe from a RevOps, from a sales team, all the way through to a finance team. There's lots of entry points here. There's data mastering that could go across different systems. There's different transaction flows. It creates a lot of complexity, and not necessarily, and that complexity may not be actually the billing or the subscription, but actually in the tech stack. So it's created this complexity within the tech stack. And, you know, when we think about a people time perspective, this is hugely absorbent of time. So, you know, be it sales because they're having to do more in the CRM or manage different systems, or be it then through to finance, whereby, and I had this when we built this big custom solution,
Right.
that was coming from an operational tool, which was also bespoke, then the reconciliation time that it took, because you've got mastering data in two places, you have to then put them together to get your month end and your analytics and that reporting. But even before you think about the reporting as a financial close, you've got to validate all of that data. And there's so much in here that you never really get to that automation. So you can plug in these shiny tools and, you know, but you never really get to automation because you've created this complexity around the infrastructure. And that then in turn can create issues. And I've seen it across the last few years, with me included, as a group FC, but then also with clients whereby they've used external tools, which has then can create two issues. The first one can be it can restrict downstream. So, you know, we all know Salesforce, so they can do billing, but if you do the billing in a different billing tool, that then restricts what you can do in your ERP. If you have a strong ERP that can do revenue recognition, they say they can do revenue recognition, which they can, and there's others. There's quite a few other ones that can do it, but then you're having to do it twice because it's not in your GL. So that's one. But then I've also seen extreme examples whereby it's wrong. So because of this, it can open you up to potential gaps in the finances and in the accounting, which clearly is a real concern. And then having to navigate that. So it's in essence, when you move, you know, it's from this chaos into something very structured. Of course, it's trying to manage that transition, and there might be a few skeletons in there, which I have seen. I myself, as a group FC, I wanted the finance team in one tool. I wanted the, you know, as much, and I was very much from the GL. Jan mentioned the very intro, you know, how you get this through to your GL, how do you get this integrity through, and I wanted it as much as I possibly can in that tool, so I could see it, I could wreck it, you know, and it wasn't disparate. So
excellent. I think that's a good time to move to the next slide then. Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, how do you focus on your growth? Okay, so you don't want to spend, as James was saying, all of your man hours, okay, work at making sure everything hangs together in the way it should. So we believe that the best way to do that is to bring your ERP, subscription billing and revenue into one tool. But there is still going to be some integrations there. So you're never going to get away from the fact that, you know, you're still going to have the engineering platform. You may do your CRM inside of NetSuite, for example, but you may still want to keep your CRM outside. So with Oracle NetSuite and Zone Billing put together, you get an all-in-one tool. You know, it's agile. So what I mean by that is, if right now, if you have 2 or 3 billing scenarios that you want to manage, you can do that with Zone Billing. Okay, but the beauty of it is, you then, when you maybe do some M&A activity, or you have a new go-to-market with a new product, okay, you've got the ability within the tool just to add more models on. Okay, so you're not then having to go and buy another tool to manage your future state, right? So it's future-proofed. Obviously, you're saving on your admin costs because you've got all of this in one area. I kind of touched on that already. Not only that, you've got one single database. I think James sort of touched on the master data and things like that. So like having that one single unified database where all of your applications that sit as well are there. Less integrations, easier compliance, you know, less risk, less financial risk as well. And also you've got that sort of global tax and localization all built into the solution. So that's really what Zone & Co offer alongside NetSuite with the help of Novutech. So this is the two put together, really. You know, obviously we're a strategic partner with Novutech as well. So if you do have a need for building a subscription to your business, then absolutely we can help with that. A bit about Zone & Co. So we're around 270 people globally in around 25 countries, or around 2,000 customers. And we do actually, zone billing is one of our applications, but we do have, other applications as well. And typically we try to make the office of the CFO easier, right, through applications that we build on the NetSuite platform. So you have AP automation, approvals, reconciling your bank statements, and we also have a reporting tool as well. And across the globe, we have a number of customers. I picked a few out here that you might recognize that use our solutions as well. I'm going to hand over to Jan now just to talk a little bit about his the Novutech business in a bit more detail.
Yes, thank you, Dominic. Indeed, so as a solution provider, a NetSuite solution provider, we've been around for a couple of years and have done helped businesses in many industries. But moving forward, we really want to become the partner for companies in the software and services industries in Western Europe, and in the same instance also be the partner for commerce companies, which excuse me, which for which the subscription, the usage-based story that we just heard described in so many aspects by our experts here is extremely important. So that's why we team up with Zone & Go and want to be their strategic partner for amongst others, of course, but mainly also the zone billing product. So again, we're in Western Europe. We're represented geographically in 4 offices today, and have ambitions to grow further, of course. But today you can find us in Brussels, in Amsterdam. In the near future, we'll be relocating to Rotterdam, but that's only a stone throw away. And we have a team in Lyon, serving the French market, and one in Copenhagen for the Nordics. Yeah. So yeah, just a few numbers to further describe us. Like I said, we have 120 NetSuite customers that we serve today, and those are mainly in the western side of Europe. But as NetSuite is I would say arguably the best solution for international business in terms of ERP, most of our customers have subsidiaries in many countries. We have a team of almost 50 people. Most of them, only a few are overhead, but most of them are certified technical and functional NetSuite consultants. So a lot of brain power there to help you on your NetSuite ERP implementations. And in the context of the conversation today, so we've been looking at our community of customers, the 120 NetSuite users that we serve on a daily basis, and we have found that 17% of them already have a billing solution that goes beyond your standard NetSuite invoicing, perhaps even enlarged when it's a small part of their business with an Excel model or something like in that direction. But 17% of our customers have a substantial part of their business in the subscription economy. Now, you've heard James talk about how that usually goes, and I want to add that we often, with NetSuite being a small to medium-sized ERP solution, we often come in when the startup phase is over. And of course, you'll see most of the companies starting their business in the garage and using solutions like a QuickBooks or an Exact or another smaller accounting solution. And when we come in, and like James described, they obviously, many of them have already built something custom to support their subscription business. So we found that some of our customers, where perhaps the subscription part of the business is not super important or super essential for the moment, they still use these custom solutions, and it's fine. And at some point they will grow into a more structured way where they'll use their ERP for the entire entire business. But and then there's 7% of our customers which we found still using a third-party billing tool. Also like James described, there's Salesforce, there's other solutions, and I would say okay, they for the moment perhaps the subscription part of their business is not important enough to start considering an ERP integrated tool like Zone Billing. Perhaps also they sometimes an ERP system like NetSuite is maybe not the ideal solution to do the whole billing. And I'm thinking like they're not a customer of ours, but some of our customers are very similar to like, for instance, a Spotify, where you have huge volumes, you have hundreds of millions of customers with very small revenue bits, and you'll see that in those scenarios. I'm also thinking about companies like a takeaway.com or whatever. That part of the business is way too vast and too heavy to actually incorporate that all of that into your backbone ERP system. So in those rare cases, it still makes sense indeed to consider a standalone solution for the billing. But I mainly want to, of course, focus today on the 5% of our customers. So that's almost 10 that already have Zone Billing, because that's actually for the vast majority of companies, we think and we believe that is the way to go, is to have your billing completely integrated in your ERP, and so that you can drill from your GL through to your revenue recognition schemes and find your individual invoice that you issue to that customer all in one system.
Yeah, and just to add there, thanks, Jan. Omar asked a question actually specifically around Suite Billing. Like, obviously, Suite Billing's there, built natively inside of NetSuite, and I'll cover this off. And you're asking that, Omar, that you're explaining that they're handling RevRec inside of NetSuite and all these kind of things. And Suite Billing has a place in the market, absolutely, right? It's if you're a subscription business that has basic subscriptions, maybe with some one-off fees and things like that, and you don't need to do any kind of complex data mediation, I would say, within your to go for your customers, that's a good solution. What I would say is Zone Billing's been around since, longer than Suite Billing. So we've been sort of every 90 days, we've been adding extra functionality into our solution. So it's about just qualifying what your requirements are. It may be that Suite Billing fits what you need to do, but you also need to think, okay, it fits now, but are you going to do some M&A activity in the future? Are you going to have a new product you want to take to market that has a different subscription option? That's the things to consider when you're comparing the two solutions. But happy to talk in more detail with you about that after this call. If you want to investigate further, we can go into that in a bit more detail.
Yeah. So in terms of customers or people in the audience questioning, okay, when how does it usually? How do you move from that QuickBooks plus some custom solution? How do I move to an ERP? Considering the fact that I have subscription and usage-based billing in my company already? Well, we'd like to hook up to the NetSuite Stairway approach, which is the main concept of the Suite Success implementation methodology, which enables us using NetSuite with built-in best practices and processes specifically for certain industries to implement the ERP system very fast in a very controlled manner, using, like I said, not to build things from scratch, but using the richness of the platform in terms of processes already there available from out of the box. So Suite Success and the NetSuite Stairway approach tells us that the best way actually to move to this new environment, a more robust environment to support the growth of your company, is to establish the basic financial layer Obviously, as James mentioned, if your subscription business is mature enough and it's important enough and it's an essential part of your business, it's always better to start in the design phase for your new ERP environment to already consider, know the details of your usage models, your subscription models, and already plan for those when you're laying down the foundation of your financials. When you're actually setting up your revenue recognition schemes, etc., it's of course it's better to keep in mind how your billing is actually going to deliver those data to your ERP system. So looking at the stairway, so establish, meaning set the basics, make sure your GL structure is all right, you have your intercompany management ready, your tax is properly set up, and then in the course of the implementation, we would integrate a tool like Zone Billing, for instance, or perhaps integrate, and you can move to the next slide, Dom, if you want. Or perhaps, like I said, there are sometimes reasons to keep your billing in a separate tool in those particular situations. Well, then after you lay down your basic layer, your record to report, your procure to pay, your multi-book accounting, once that's done, either we integrate the Zone Billing Suite app. As you can see, it's completely built into NetSuite. It's NetSuite look and feel, NetSuite code. So it's one integrated part of your ERP. Or in case there's a particular reason, we would in a second phase build the interface to integrate with a third-party billing tool if that's required.
So I get that's the end of our presentation. So thanks everybody for joining in. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'd be happy to take any further questions. But if you don't have any questions right now and you'd like to come to us directly, you can reach out to Jan on the details in the screen in front of you.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you, everybody. Are there any questions?
No, there's no further questions so far that have come up in the chat.
Okay, well, I hope it was insightful for everybody. As a partner, as a NetSuite partner, we try to bundle knowledge and bundle industry expertise, which of course was so eloquently brought to us by James and Dominic today. And so we try to use that in our implementations of NetSuite with a Zone Billing tool, for instance, for you. So if you want to further discuss, do reach out. And otherwise, I thank you for being part of this conversation. James, you wanted to?
There is a question that's just popped up from Olivia. How would you position Zone Billing with SAP S/4HANA Public Cloud? So, do you want me to take this one, Tom?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Go for it.
Well, so the answer is, and it sounds a bit like a politician answer. So it's difficult to compare the two because you're comparing a billing solution to an ERP solution. The consideration would be obviously more akin to NetSuite against SAP S/4HANA to get an apples and apples. What I would say is SAP, Dynamics, and the other competitors in the market, when you start to look at how their modules and how they're structured, they will be much more akin just in their normal infrastructure to be like the spaghetti diagram that we showed earlier. So what NetSuite have been able to do is plug those core modules into one ERP system, and the strength of Zone Billing to then compare it somewhat to SAP would be that plugs in as one of those modules. So when Dom showed that circle earlier on, it's within that, as opposed to another bolt-in module that kind of comes in on the side of a solution. So if you're in the early stages of looking between well, maybe, I don't know if you're already on SAP, but that's a key comparison when you're looking at what actually sits within the system and what still remains as an external module, because having used SAP and Dynamics and a few others, you'll find that there will be restrictions when it comes to records, reporting, controls. So that'd be a bit of an overview from me.
If I may add, James and Don, for your information, Olivier is one of the, I would say, one of the leading digital architects in Belgium. He has a community of people really, I should say, driving the digital transformation as from a consulting perspective in the whole of Belgium, to be honest. So I can believe, I think this webinar for Olivier is nice as an introduction, but it's way too high level. And I would certainly need to invite Olivier to reach out to us, and we will set up a much more in-depth conversation with him, because he needs that kind of information to have a clear picture on the market. Of course.
So we can, I read some of the responses, Olivier, thanks for that. And I think we should definitely have a call with you, because we recently won a piece of business in the Nordics where they were considering SAP subscription billing, and we together with NetSuite, we actually won the business with that company. So happy to, and I'll bring Yuri in, who's also in this call, into that conversation as well, because it's one of his team that actually ran that deal. So more than happy to take that conversation further, for sure. I think there was another question. Jason Ross says, we use Salesforce and NetSuite. Can the sales team in Salesforce see the billing information and ARR for a customer? Who wants to take that?
James, feel free.
Yeah, no, yes is the short answer.
Yeah.
So through the integration, there are multiple different integration tools, but that can definitely be fed back through to Salesforce. So you can have a two-way integration through that then sends it back up there, and any reports, because you can sit it on strength again of NetSuite, you can, because it's within the one tool, you can sit that on the customer record, and you can send that back through to Salesforce so they can see it.
And just to add to that point as well, if we look across the whole of the zone billing business and what we see in our implementations, around 90% of our business involves in a Salesforce integration, right? So this is not new for us. This is what we see on most of our implementations right now.
Yeah, and to add my 50 cents, we have, like I said, like I showed in the statistics, we have customers still or using Salesforce for their billing, and there might even be. I remember one customer where we implemented NetSuite, and the billing was in Salesforce, and they could see all that information, the billing information, the ARR, and it was for the simple political reason that their software platform, was built on force.com, and so they needed to keep that relationship with Salesforce. So it made total sense, even from a political standpoint, to keep NetSuite on the back end and Salesforce for the front end billing.
Excellent. So I think we've covered all the questions. I really appreciate this, guys. I mean, it's good. It's always good when you get a few questions that you can answer off the back of what's been presented. So as I said, if you want to talk, Olivier, definitely reach out to Jan and let's get a call set up. And Omar as well. I know you had a question, so if you're still here, I'm not sure if you're still here, but if you want to take a further conversation, then reach out to Jan and we'll get something set up. And the whole team really appreciate the time you took to come on today and hear what we had to say.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye. See you in the next webinar.